Hi again, everyone. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV's College Football Coast to Coast. And this is the very last College Football Coast to Coast, not for the year. We are back here next Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. This is the last College Football Coast to Coast in season. National championship game tonight. Alabama, 7-point favorite against Clemson. So I advise you to get ready, to get prepped up, to get primed, to go to my channel on YouTube at Mark Rogers TV. I've got 3 separate previews on the game from 3 different perspectives. From Jack Hummel, who is a news and sports anchor for KOMU out of Columbia, Missouri, covers Missouri football, has strong ties to Clemson. Also, Stephen M. Smith from Touchdown, Alabama, who is at the game and, of course, covers the Crimson Tide and brings an enthusiasm and energy that is off the charts, we will say. Also, the knowledge, he brings it. And then we also have a perspective from Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC covering Clemson football as well, and myself. So by the end of the half hour, I will unveil my prediction. It's out there on social media, so if you follow me on Mark Rogers TV, either on Facebook or on Twitter, you know where I stand on this one. Okay, big keys to the game. Deshaun Watson, best quarterback in the country? I believe so. I don't think it's a slam dunk. I don't think there's no debate concerning Deshaun Watson's status in college football after accounting for like 45 touchdowns this year, running and passing, that he is the best. I am concerned about his increase in interceptions this year. That has mainly been due to a few poor decisions, also trusting his receivers to out-battle wide receivers or defensive backs. And his receivers are coming up against the best secondary. There could be a debate with Florida State in regards to talent. And this Alabama secondary much improved from the version we saw in 2014. So those Clemson wide receivers, minus the still suspended Deion Kane, much to be concerned about in the one-on-one matchups with the Alabama secondary. But, of course, it's that Alabama front 4, and it's more like a front 9 as they rotate players. That is going to be a huge concern for Deshaun Watson and company. So, as we see most of the time when we see and get to this point in the season, Final 4, Final 2, strength versus strength, something has to give. If you look at all the metrics, they speak to both sides. Of course, these teams have arrived at 14-0 and 13-1 and in the championship game because they mostly dominate opponents. Okay, there can only be one side that dominates, if anyone dominates, tonight. So the metrics, for example, tell us that Deshaun Watson is the second most protected quarterback in the country. The metrics also tell us that Alabama has put the 5th most pressure of 129 FBS teams, 5th most pressure on quarterbacks of any team in the country. So something has to give. And when Alabama puts pressure on Deshaun Watson, how is he going to respond? Is he fast enough, quick enough, and going to make the decisive run move out of contain quick enough and wise enough to find the right hole and the right angle to beat the Alabama defense to the first down marker or for positive yardage or to get himself out of a negative play and only lose a yard versus losing 6 or 8 yards? That's going to be huge. Where Johnny Manziel a couple years ago was effective against the Alabama defense and other defenses in the SEC that are extremely fast, extremely quick, is that his burst within a 5-yard radius was exceptional. You don't see it so much in the NFL for obvious reasons. The speed is all over the place. Deshaun Watson versus the Alabama front 7. This front 7, the front 4 in particular, again, the 4 guys playing on any particular given play on the field. We're talking about 7 to 9 players. Ridiculously talented. A'Shawn Robinson, Jonathan Allen. Wow. It's a tremendous front 4. Ryan Anderson comes into the game with 11.5 tackles for loss and 6 sacks. Jonathan Allen, 14.5 tackles for loss, 12 sacks. Tim Williams, coming off the edge, 10 sacks, 11 and a half tackles for loss. This is the first time in Alabama football under Nick Saban, and going back to the national championship squad of 1992 against Miami, befuddling Gino Torretta with Curry and Copeland at the end positions, both first-round picks in the NFL draft, both top 10 picks. This is the first time since that vintage Alabama defense in 92 that the Crimson Tide has had 2 10-sack players. That's not to speak of the exploits of Reuben Foster, Reggie Ragland, and company behind them. Alabama, front seven versus Deshaun Watson holds the key to the game. I hate to shoulder the load entirely on Deshaun Watson. Of course, he's one of 22 players who will, on a regular basis, be on the field for Clemson, and probably one of 40 who will see action in the game. So anybody, mostly, if you're looking at the contributions of players across the board, there's more opportunity to lose the game, mess up the game, miss a block that gets a receiver blown up or a punt returner blown up, or missing a tackle that allows a Cyrus Jones to take a punt 65 yards for a touchdown. There's more opportunity to lose the game and be the GOAT than there is for most of those players to make a play that's going to make a complete difference. Most of them are obviously role players and can only have so much positive impact. That said, any player on the field can blow the game at any time. Unless, of course, Alabama gets in position like they did against Michigan State last week, 10-0 at half, then quickly 38-0 in the fourth quarter. That I don't believe is going to happen tonight. I'll have my pick in a few minutes. I think Alabama has a decided advantage because of defense. They have faced 2 quarterbacks this year, and I'll say 3 quarterbacks this year that present the same type of challenge as Deshaun Watson, in most notably Dak Prescott of Mississippi State, and the Bulldogs gave Bama little resistance. That game was out of hand quickly. Alabama had a commanding lead, something in the 21-3 range, very quickly in that game into the second quarter. Against Tennessee, Alabama had to slug it out, and Tennessee gave them all sorts of fits, mostly on defense, the Tennessee defense against Jay Coker and company. That was a 19-14 game in which Alabama trailed late 14-13, had to drive in the last 4 minutes to win in Tuscaloosa against Tennessee. So they can be beaten. And Ole Miss obviously did it. My third example, Chad Kelly. Not as gifted a runner maybe as Josh Dobbs, but definitely athletic quarterback who can move. Not Deshaun Watson, but Chad Kelly, polished quarterback, throws it up a little bit too much, interceptions, had 14, I believe, this season. But he would be the other example of a Deshaun Watson type of quarterback who can do both. Connor Cook, I respect Connor Cook. Love to watch him carve up a defense from the pocket, but that wasn't going to happen against Alabama. Just not going to happen. That was an ill-fated recipe for disaster for Michigan State. This is the Spartans' worst rushing attack that they have mounted in quite a few years under Mark D'Antonio. When we think Michigan State, we think shutdown defense. We think shutdown corners on defense, and we also think running game. And Michigan State, obviously, or not obviously to many, they actually had the worst rushing attack of the 4 playoff teams. Mediocre rushing attack with a pocket passer who has to throw from the pocket and does not threaten the defense. That was disaster for Michigan State. Much different situation with Clemson this week. Deshaun Watson, obvious dual threat. The offensive line similar to Michigan State. I would say it's a little less accomplished than Michigan State, but it's similar in terms of productivity. Wayne Gallman, a better back than anyone that Michigan State currently has. LJ Scott has a chance to be better. He was just a freshman this year. Highly recruited player out of Ohio. LJ Scott, look out for him in the future for Michigan State. Gerald Holmes getting a lot of playing time for Michigan State as well. Wayne Gallman will present a bigger challenge to the Alabama defense. In regards to stop and start runs, we saw many of the video clips of plays that were broken down for us this week. Wayne Gallman can stop and start. I'm not going to say with the best of them, but better than most backs in college football. He also wouldn't call him a workman, a workhorse, but he's a workman-like back who carried it 26 times. This was key against Oklahoma. Deshaun Watson was the offense in the first half in a 17-16 game. Wayne Gallman was called upon in the second half and delivered 26 carries, $150 against Oklahoma. Do I expect Wayne Gallman to have that kind of success against Alabama? No, but they have to try. They have to continue to give him the ball, and hopefully for Clemson's sake, they stay in the game and can give Gallman the ball, and I think he'll be fairly productive and will find some running room against Alabama. If he goes 20 carries for 80 yards, that's probably a win for Clemson. When we talk about metrics running into each other and something having to give, the Alabama defense has not allowed a quarterback to rush for more than 29 yards this season, and that was the Chattanooga quarterback. I don't think that game was competitive, and maybe he had some room to run late in the game. All right, maybe he took off for a 28-yard run. Deshaun Watson has gained 100 yards in 5 of 6 games to close out the 2015 season. He had $145 against Oklahoma. If Deshaun Watson runs for $145 against Bama, then that spells good news, good things for Clemson. Deshaun Watson against the Alabama front seven. We've talked about it for the last 5 or 10 minutes. Claire joins us, as well as Bro Rick Patton. So thanks so much for jumping on. If you'd like to take a seat, certainly do. We'll be on for another 15 minutes. Otherwise, you can leave some comments and questions. Claire, hopefully you haven't missed too much here. We've talked about Deshaun Watson, most notably, and Wayne Gallman against the Alabama front seven. Also, those Clemson wide receivers doing one-on-one battle downfield with the Alabama defensive backs. I think Aaron Burbridge is probably a better wide receiver at Michigan State than anybody that Alabama will face tonight, but the Clemson wide receiver core as a whole, in its entirety, better than Michigan State, going 4 or 5 deep, even without the suspended Deion Kane. Big loss for Clemson here. Not crucial. There's other guys who can step in. But Deion Kane was probably the most productive downfield receiver. Artavis Scott catching the most passes, but Kane, the most productive downfield receiver late in the season for Clemson. Saw a lot of Clemson people at the Phoenix airport last night. I guess you would. I don't know how to expect the crowd to show up. I would think it's fairly 50-50. We have not much Alabama. Okay. They're used to this. And I plugged my 3 previews at the top of the show with Jack Hummel of KOMU in Columbia, Mizzou, who talks Missouri football, also has close ties to Clemson. Check that out on Mark Rogers TV. Also, Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama, who's covering Alabama for the aforementioned magazine and other outlets. He's at the game. And also a breakdown with Mike McDaniel from Inside the ACC on the Clemson perspective. So get primed for the game, checking those out. Yeah, Alabama's used to this. On one hand, Nick Saban's used to preparing his team for a national championship game under the old format, the BCS format, with like 50 or 55 days to wait. He didn't experience the situation last year, having lost to Ohio State. What's the preparation for 10 or 11 days? Well, probably gave these kids a couple days off, and then it goes into a normal routine in terms of the week, travel, and preparing for the game. So probably not a big curveball for Nick Saban to deal with, and Dabo Swinney as well. What Dabo Swinney's done at Clemson, and we'll welcome in new to Blab, Mark Candleman. Hey, Mark, how are you? Thanks for joining the show. This is College Football Coast to Coast. We join you each and every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern time. May have to switch things up as I'll be on the road next Monday, but we've made it 10 consecutive weeks every Monday at 1 o'clock talking college football. you might expect. It's all about Alabama and Clemson this week, but mostly we're taking your calls and your comments and questions and talking college football coast to coast, all over the place. So thanks for jumping in, Mark. We have a few people on board right now. Then we post this show to my YouTube channel where it gets, fortunately, many more views than what we're able to generate here live on Blab. But hopefully we're building a community, and if we're consistent with this 1 o'clock time slot, Eastern time, then we can get some people on board and generate some interaction and some engagement. So I talked Clemson offense against Alabama defense. Alabama offense, I don't think Jake Coker gets enough credit for what he's accomplished at Alabama. Jake Coker, if you watch him, you would think pocket passer, Connor Cook type. He's not. He can break contain. He makes defenders, athletic defenders on SEC defenses. Watch the tape against good SEC defenses, very athletic, fast linebackers, defensive ends in the SEC, safeties, miss Jake Coker in the open field. So don't be surprised if you see Coker break contain a couple times tonight and make Clemson defenders miss in the open field. He can do it. He's more wise with his cuts and his decisions and understands what he can do and what he can't do than he is like straight line fast. But he can run, he can break contain, he's going to have to be accounted for. Are they going to spy Jake Coker? No. Will Alabama spy Deshaun Watson? Probably. And it's been effective. It was effective in the first half for Oklahoma before Deshaun Watson got loose. And so Jake Coker, 25 of 30 against Michigan State, has played very efficient football down the stretch. He was considered the weak link of this Alabama football team for most of the season. I don't think they have a weak link at this point. We know about Derrick Henry. Michigan State loaded up to stop Derrick Henry, and they generally did. 20 carries, 75 yards. But the offense let them down. They could not continue to go out there 3 and out on the offensive side, and Michigan State finally wore down against Alabama's offense. When you see 38-0, it appears as though Michigan State played poorly on the defensive side. They did not. They got hit with a couple plays. One against Calvin Ridley was late in the game. The game was decided. That made it like 31-0. The one that broke their back was early, was second quarter, down 3-0. Calvin Ridley beat a corner, beat him badly. Coker was on the money. It was 10-0. And because of the way the Alabama defense was playing and continued to play, that was the game. So Mackenzie Alexander versus Calvin Ridley. Very intriguing. If you love watching premier elite athletes go at it one-on-one in space, you want to watch Mackenzie Alexander, one of the elite cover corners in college football, just a sophomore, against Calvin Ridley, just a freshman for Alabama. And if you want to go to Vegas and play a dark horse Heisman pick for next year, Calvin Ridley could be your guy. In the Alabama offense, he's not going to touch it as much as many receivers across the country, but he is dynamic, and he will make plays that prove to be the difference. He has, during this season, he made plays against Tennessee in a narrow Alabama win that decided that game. His stats didn't jump off the board, but he still did catch for over 800 yards, something in that range, 55, 60 catches for Calvin Ridley. His stats might have been better than that. Calvin Ridley caught 83 passes this year for over 1,000 yards. Just a freshman. So Mackenzie Alexander did a number on Oklahoma's big threat, Sterling Shepard. So if you watch Oklahoma football, they move Sterling Shepard around in formations. They throw him bubble screens. He goes deep. He can play in the slot. He plays wide. He's all over the place. They try to confuse the defense and get the matchups to get their number one playmaker, Sterling Shepard, in space against anyone. Mackenzie Alexander, who was mostly on Sterling Shepard, gave up 7 catches, but they meant little in production. 87 yards, no big plays. Sterling Shepard did little against Clemson. Mackenzie Alexander looks to have the same success against Calvin Ridley. Cordrea Tankersley, the other corner, 5 interceptions for Clemson. He will be key in stopping Ardarius Stewart. Darius Stewart, who's an excellent complementary receiver to Calvin Ridley. Alabama doesn't want to throw it 40 times, but when they throw it, they want to be effective downfield. So they will probably take about 5 shots in this game, and they would like to hit 2 home run shots, then other plays downfield, 20, 25-yard plays. Interesting, I'm jumping to the other side of the football again just because this stat comes to mind that I heard this week, that when Alabama gives up a touchdown pass of plus 20 yards, they're only 8-5 under Nick Saban. When they don't give up a scoring play through the air of 20 yards, they're 44-1. Pass defense, key for Alabama. Not as much for this team than what we saw last year and the breakdowns against Auburn and Ohio State and some others when Alabama had some issues in the secondary. Nick Saban, Kirby Smart have addressed the secondary this year, and it's much more capable than it was when Alabama fell short in 2014. So it's Alabama, it's Clemson. Catch the previews on Mark Rogers TV. Again, we've got 3 previews with 3 very capable broadcasters and bloggers on Mark Rogers TV. All right, I have promised to win. I have promised a correct prediction. All right, national championship game, Alabama-Clemson. I think Alabama's too strong up front. You got to believe in that front 4, in that front 7 that Alabama brings. It's one of the most devastating defenses we've seen in recent years in college football. They have shored up the issues they had in the secondary last year in giving up big plays. Clemson's an extremely tough and talented team. They will not go away. I don't believe we'll see anything like we saw last week against Michigan State. We pointed out the reasons why the Spartans were a bad matchup against Alabama. I don't believe that Alabama's a 38-0 team better than Michigan State on most occasions. If they played 10 times, Michigan State probably wins a couple times, plays it close a couple times, but Alabama decidedly the better team. That's a bad matchup. What Clemson brings that Michigan State does not bring is a top 10 to top 15 tier running back with Wayne Gallman. Michigan State doesn't have that right now. LJ Scott is developing as a freshman. Michigan State does not have a premier back. Clemson also has 4 or 5 receivers that can hurt you. Michigan State was let down by drops by McCarrot Kings. Aaron Burbridge might be better than anybody that Clemson has at the wide receiver position, but Clemson is deeper at wide receiver, so they present more there. And Deshaun Watson is obviously the best quarterback, dual threat quarterback that Alabama will face this year. We compared him to Josh Dobbs, Chad Kelly, and most notably Dak Prescott at the top of the show. So those guys are similar. They're not as efficient, not as good. Prescott would be close to Deshaun Watson. So Deshaun Watson makes some plays. Clemson keeps it relatively close. Too much Derrick Henry. They'll wear down the defense. This Clemson defense, yes, it looked great, exceptional against Oklahoma's offensive line. They were chasing Baker Mayfield all over the lot, contained him, threw him all over the place, made his life miserable. But this Alabama offensive line will run the football. They'll protect most of the time. And I see 34-17 Alabama. They win. They cover the spread. It's a decent game. It's enough to keep people engaged. Couple score difference most of the second half where Deshaun Watson will threaten the defense and threaten to get Clemson within striking distance. But Alabama pulls away. They win 34-17. That's what I got. Am I watching the game? Well, that's a bit confusing in that, or complicated for me in that I'm kind of working the game. So based on my day job, working the game, so I will be very engaged in the game, but still working at the same time. And then I will need to come home, decompress, watch the game on DVR, and knock out my recap of the national championship game. So Ross just joined. Ross, I would thanks for joining. First of all, we're here every Monday, college football coast to coast, every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern time. We're trying to build a community here on Blab. You can reach me at Mark Rogers TV on Twitter and also Mark Rogers TV on Facebook. And my YouTube channel is Mark Rogers TV. Last year, we just ran the numbers. We posted more than 717 to be exact, college football videos, Mark Rogers TV on YouTube. We talked to top bloggers across the nation. We have quite the network of bloggers that we bring on and talk. So good to have you guys on board. This has been another college football coast to coast. Again, Alabama wins tonight over Clemson 34-17. If you just jumped on late, I will have this show posted on YouTube at Mark Rogers TV in just a couple hours. So thanks for joining. We'll be back next Monday. We have some travel plans, may have to switch the time up next week, but it's every Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern time. Good to see you guys. Enjoy the game tonight.